to work. You have to truly believe in the magic.
Hey Magic fans, I'm Mikey and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Magic and Orlando Magic podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be joined by the podfather, Philip RossmanReich, Locked On Magic and Orlando Magic Daily, to talk about next week's NBA draft, who the Magic may be targeting and how the draft's going to shape the rest of the summer for the Orlando Magic. But before we get into our conversation with Phil, we're recording on Thursday the 20th of June. Right after England's disappointing draw against Denmark in Euro 2024. We're not going to discuss that, Gary. I don't think it's not even worth it. It was just a dismal performance. And
it's matched the tournament, Mikey.
It's matched the tournament. Yeah, you could say that. And then just to make us feel even better, we saw that JJ Redick's just become the Los Angeles Lakers head coach. So Magic fan favourite JJ Redick has also gone to the dark side as well. But what do you think of that, Gary?
Agent Redick, you know what your mission is. Do you choose to accept?
And what's that?
I couldn't possibly say 10
Make
wins.
them an even bigger mess than they already 10, are.
10 wins next season with Agent Redick.
10 wins. and do you think he's going to walk away with a bag like Monty Williams did?
I hope so. I like JJ Redick. I'll still like JJ Redick when he's the Lakers coach, but
yeah,
I think he's got everything there to have a good shot at being a coach. I wouldn't want to be him in his first gig, even though he's an incredibly strong character, having to manage that. And you know what I mean by that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I also saw somebody, was there a post about, because obviously the Pistons are looking for a head coach as well, and they were like, well, JJ Redick's got a better opportunity to be a more successful coach in the Pistons. I'm like, yeah, but is that a better scenario than the Lakers? I mean,
would you like the Black Death or cholera to kill you?
Do you want the red pill or the blue pill?
Yeah, Black Death or cholera? Which one would you?
Oh man. Well, before we dive into the show, we just want to say a big thank you to our Patreons for your incredible support. To Barry Conn, Paolo and Franz Warmth, Ollie Law, Gary Clark, Angus Craig, Dylan Holden, Alan Kane, Tom Soane, Mark Joss, Sean Moore, Liam Radbourne, Andy Lee, Stuart Benzies, Drum, and Podfather Phil loves Hazy Northwestern. If you're interested in joining our Patreon, we have 3 tiers available with varying benefits. All you need to do is visit patreon.com/Let's Talk Magic to join today. Gary, how are you? I haven't even introduced you.
It's completely fine.
It's completely fine. It's just Gary and me tonight. G is on another bender, I think.
I think he was out watching the England game. He'd be really disappointed because I heard he was singing Sweet Caroline after the first game. You know, that's what I've heard. He booked the England game off. He's booked tomorrow off, and he's gone on to cheer Gareth Southgate and the boys. He's got a large cupboard of football jerseys. We know that. I've heard there's an England one in there.
There's an England one there for the pod where England win Euro 2024, and that's his.
I heard he crosses the bridge, comes to England, and cheers England on, and goes back to Wales afterwards. Just what I heard.
You can see him standing on the Severn Bridge, waving the St George's flag around, can't you?
Yeah, the English side of it.
Yeah.
Wait till he watches this. It'd be like a foot, like a size 9 hole in his TV where he's.
Oh man. But Paul's a late scratch. Paul's all right, but I think he's going to be back next week. So we'll look forward to having him on to tell us about his download festival, which we'll be looking forward to. Okay, right. Let's jump into our conversation with Philip. This week, we are joined by a special guest to help us figure out what the Magic are going to do this offseason. We're less than a week away from the NBA draft and then just a couple of weeks away from NBA free agency. So this week, we're joined by Philip RossmanReich of Locked On Magic and Orlando Magic Daily. Phil, I can't believe it's been over 6 weeks already since the Magic season's come to an end in Cleveland at Game 7. First of all, have you managed to take some time off? I know you work extremely hard. Have you enjoyed a little bit of your off season?
Yeah, I've gotten some time to like decompress. I haven't traveled anywhere. Got a couple Disney days in, so I've had some
Nice.
opportunity to kind of like decompress, reflect on what we've had during the season, reflect on the journey, and get ready for what's going to be a really fun 2 weeks, and then a lot of quiet until. I guess we get the Olympics in late July, but a lot of quiet until training camp opens in September.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. I'm going to watch USA and Germany at the O2 next month. I think it's 4 weeks away now. So that's going to be fun.
Fast.
It's going to come very fast. And then we're going to have training camp right around the corner after that. And then we'll do this thing all again. Phil, the last time we sat down with you was back in, I think it was November, when we joined you on Locked On Magic to preview the in-season tournament and how that might give this team some experience and in get pressure situations. Spit your words out. It certainly was a big learning experience for the Magic, but I think there was even bigger takeaways to take away from the 7-game series against Cleveland. So first of all, what do you think was the single most important lesson that the Magic had learned from that series against Cleveland?
I think the biggest thing is that they learned they can play in that environment, that the culture, the group that they put together. I mean, it took them a game and a half maybe to really understand what playoff basketball was and to adjust to the intensity and the detail that they need. But they showed up, even game 1 and game 2, they lost pretty comfortably, I would say. Like Cleveland won those games pretty comfortably, but they didn't get blown out. Like I remember leaving game 1 and saying like, yeah, Cleveland won, they deserved to win. The final score is probably a little closer than the actual game was played, but like Orlando didn't quit. They did not let themselves get run out of the gym. They did not let them, they played the full 48 minutes. They might not have been ready or as prepared as they needed to be with a rookie coach and a young team, but they got to that stage. They took a pretty big punch and they're like, oh, we actually kind of like this. We're kind of into this thing. And they showed up the rest of the series. I mean, obviously it was a disappointing finish and game 7 on its own was really disappointing in the result and the way that result came through. But I think this Magic team exited the playoffs knowing that they belong, and all this talk of, what this team's future could be. I think we all saw it. I think the league saw it. And I think the Magic, really saw it play out. Not that they didn't ever not believe in themselves, but they saw what they're capable of doing on a big pressure packed stage. And I have to imagine that that's something that's going to feed them the rest of the offseason.
Yeah.
So basically, Mikey said at the start about the draft being less than a week away, Phil, and we're looking really into like prospects at some point. But for the first time, the NBA has made a bit of a change in the stretching the draft over 2 days. So we've got the first round on the Wednesday, the 26th of June. For us in the UK, that's 1 a.m. start. It's 8 Eastern time if you're in Orlando. The second round will be on Thursday, and that's 9 o'clock if you're in the UK. 4 o'clock Eastern time if you're in Orlando. So why have the NBA done this almost like NFL model? Are you a fan of it? And the 4 o'clock Eastern time for an American audience seems a little bit off.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go with the selfish part first. I don't know what it's going to be like. I have no sense of how this is going to play out. I like it because it means we're going to get out of the Advent Health Training Center a little bit earlier on Wednesday night. I think that part will be good. And certainly a Thursday night, we won't be there till, I've been at draft parties till like 12:30 writing, because things happen late and they have, like I remember one year when Rob Hennigan traded Aaron Follow for Evan Fournier. He didn't come down till like 11:30, 11:45 because they had to wait for the trade call to be completed before they could come talk to us about things, and things became official. A lot of, at the end, the reason why the draft is 2 nights, ESPN wanted a second night. The NBA, I think, wanted to make the draft a bigger deal and kind of follow the NFL, but it's TV inventory. A lot of these decisions, they're all made for money. They're all made for the television partners, which is where the league gets most of its money. So it's going to be an interesting experiment. I always applaud the NBA because they're willing to try some new things. And if something doesn't work, they adjust or they scrap it, but they're willing to try new things. I think a lot of people I think a lot of GMs wanted this too, because the second round happens really quickly. Like it's 3 minutes, I think, between picks. A lot of times, they don't even know who has what pick. And so there's so much movement going on in the second round. I think a lot of GMs wanted to kind of hit the pause button a little bit and say, hey, let's slow this thing down a little bit for us. And the league, I think, also recognizes that a lot of the interest in the NBA is about trades. And so now you get an extra 36 hours to kind of be in this trade mode, in this movement mode. And I think a lot of people do kind of expect that there will be trades made between the first and the second round that might not have been made. Now you're giving teams a little bit more time to negotiate and talk about things. So the second round, the day on Thursday, might be more about transactions than it is about the draft itself, which, I think is maybe a little bit unfortunate, because this should be a day to celebrate. This is the best day in a lot of these young men's lives. It should be a day to celebrate them. I always push back against the kind of transaction heavy coverage of the NBA. I know we're doing a transaction heavy show today because that's the part of the year we're in. But this is also, I think, an opportunity to give those players maybe a special moment on the second day of the draft. So the main thing that I've heard from people who've talked about is they're trying it. We're going to see if we like it. If we need to adjust some things, we'll adjust some things. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And we did it for 1 year, and who cares? So we'll see how it all works out. I'm interested to see how it works out and see how things play out. But it's going to be a little bit different for sure.
Yeah. I mean, the NBA have nailed the play-in tournament, and the in-season tournament was a success last year, I would say. So they don't rush into these decisions. I think it's probably something they've talked about for quite a while, but they thought this year was a good year to roll it out.
We can tune in early for some cash considerations on the second day.
Oh God, we got that cash considerations graphic ready to go. That second round pick on Thursday, whatever snacks they have, I'm just gonna be in the training center. I'm just gonna be sitting there eating snacks all day. It'll be fun.
Gonna be good. It's gonna be good. So Phil, you said just before that you talked about what the Magic had learned from the 7-game series against the Cavaliers. We've obviously got the 18th overall pick, and we've also got the 47th pick in the second round. Could you tell us, in your opinion, what you feel is the Magic's biggest needs? I think it's pretty obvious, but what do you think the Magic need to solve this summer? And do you think we can solve that with the picks that we've got?
I mean, yes. I think the biggest need the Magic have, everyone will say shooting. And obviously I think shooting is a very big need. The Magic, I think, more than just an increased percentage. They were 24th in the league, I think, in 3-point field goal percentage last year. As Jeff Weltman reminded us the day after the season ended, they were 15th in the league after January 1st. It's not just about increasing the shooting percentage. It's about increasing the shooting volume. Orlando was 29th in the league in 3-point field goal attempts. And, the team that's last is Denver, and Denver's considered a very good shooting team. And they are. They shot 41, 42% from three. Orlando's at 33, 34, 35%. Being a low volume and bad shooting team is a very bad formula. In fact, I start pushing back on Jeff Weltman on this a little bit. Yes, the Magic were 15th in 3-point field goal percentage after the All-Star, or after January 1st. They're still 21st in the league in offensive rating. So while it did boost their offense to make more threes, that alone isn't enough to make the Magic's offense an elite offensive group, or even a mediocre or average offensive group. So they're still, they have to find shooting. And I think, that's going to come internally. I think they'll get some external help on that. To me, though, the biggest need coming out of the playoffs the biggest need is to make Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner's life easier. Whatever they can do to make their lives easier, that's what the Magic need to do. And shooting's obviously a big part of that. To me, the biggest thing coming out of the playoffs was the Magic needed another playmaker. It felt like, especially in the games in Cleveland, because I think the Magic did a good job of this in Orlando, but especially in the games in Cleveland, it always just felt like Paolo Banchero was banging his head against a wall. He was just kind of slamming directly into Evan Mobley and Jared Allen was in Jared Allen and whoever was in the paint. And that's all the Magic could do. That was all they had. With Franz Wagner struggling a little bit with his shot, they couldn't get anyone else going downhill. And so I think the big thing for Orlando is they need to find a way to diversify their attack. They need someone who can get downhill, create shots for others, give Paolo Banchero some easy shots. I mean, when you think about it, the difference between Paolo Banchero, he averaged 22 points per game this year. The difference between getting to 22 to 26, 27 points per game could be getting an extra catch and shoot 3-pointer that he wasn't getting. He shot the ball really well he shot the ball really well from 3 in the playoffs. It could be him running a pick and roll and getting a dump off to the dunker spot. It's not necessarily that you have to get Paolo Banchero more shots. It's about getting him better quality shots. And because he has to create so many of his own shots, he shot a really good percentage this year. I don't want, I'm not taking anything away from Paolo Banchero, but it's just about making his shot diet a little bit easier, getting him finding someone who can get him the ball in a spot where he can score. I think back to, this is actually a really good example. I think back to that game winner he had against Chicago. Joe Ingles is the one inbounding the ball. He inbounds it directly into Paolo and steps onto the court in a spot where he can be a kick out for a 3-point shot. And the Bulls couldn't help off of Ingles because they know Ingles is an excellent 3-point shooter. And so Paolo is starting with the ball, able to survey the defense without having to use his dribble yet. So he can do, any number of things. And obviously he made the big play, won the game with that shot. In the playoffs, because they couldn't really play Ingles that much because the rotation had developed the way it had developed, he really didn't have that. He was constantly bringing the ball up as a point guard, initiating offense, using up his dribble. And so that limits his kind of decision tree. And so to me,
it became too predictable.
Yeah. And look, at the end of the day, your star needs to be able to beat defenses that know what's coming. And
sure.
Again, big takeaway from the playoffs, Paolo Banchero did that. Paolo was a superstar in the playoffs. It was just this kid isn't just he's a really nice player. It's he's one of those.
He's that guy.
Yeah, he's him. And so the big takeaway from playoffs there. And so to me, the needs for the Magic is just how do we make his life easier? How do we find players who can play off of him, set him up, give him a little bit more space to create and get downhill? How do we find those players? With this year's draft specifically, a lot of this is, I don't think that's a young player necessarily. I just don't think a young player that, unless they are just a knockdown shooter or just one of those guys, and those guys will be long gone by the time we get to where the Magic are picking. I don't see the Magic trying to trade up to get one of those guys, maybe but even then, they're not developed enough to kind of set the table for Paolo the way that I think he's looking for. So to me, this year's draft is more about continuing to establish depth. We saw last year that the Magic didn't even really play their two rookies. Anthony Black and Jet Howard were out of the rotation by the time we got to the playoffs. Jet Howard essentially spent a gap year in the G League. He's essentially a rookie this year. He played, I think, less than a full game's worth of minutes, I believe, in the season. If not, he played fewer than 100 minutes with the Orlando Magic this season. And that's fine. I think that was part of the plan. Anthony Black was out of the rotation. Just, he played because of injuries, kind of lost some trust, never really got it back in February. And so, he's going to have to take a step up, but the Magic don't necessarily need a rookie who can come in and play immediately. If they can get one of those, great. They just need someone who's going to be reliable for them when his number's called, but also be willing to learn from the bench, play some in Osceola, get that experience there, and kind of grow and develop at their own pace. And so that's a really difficult thing to find. I am always a believer in the draft. You take the best player available. Need does kind of get included in how you think about who the best player available is. But, at the end of the day, I think in the draft, you draft talent and you figure out how to integrate that talent later because you're not necessarily expecting them to compete immediately. Yeah.
Phil, give us 3 names. So the 18th pick, give us, because we don't watch much college basketball. We don't get to see a lot over here. If we keep the 18th pick, what's 3 players you have your eye on that you think would be a good fit?
The one that I think is the best fit, and I'll give you more than 3 names. I'm going to give you 3 player types. Player types. The first is kind of that traditional Magic big wing, high IQ big wing. And the guy that's been mocked to the Magic probably more than any player is Tristan Da Silva from Colorado. He's 6'9", really, really smart player. He's 4-year player, so veteran player, someone that a lot of people believe can come into the league and play immediately. Decent passer, not a playmaker, not averaging a ton of assists. But an excellent shooter. He shot 40% from 3 last year, good free throw percentage, which suggests that will translate to the NBA. I would describe him as a less athletic Franz Wagner. He plays very similarly, kind of similar build, kind of that ability to kind of weave his way through defenses. Again, not as athletic, so he's not kind of going to finish above the rim like Franz can, but he just plays really smart. And especially as a veteran player, I mean, you think, when I kind of compare what we're looking for in the draft a little bit, think about what Courtney Lee did for the Magic in the 2009 season. He was a rookie, but he was also a senior coming out of Western Kentucky. So he was ready to play immediately. Tristan Da Silva would be ready to play immediately. It looks like he's going to be gone by the time the Magic picks. So if you're not going to take Tristan Da Silva, The other guy that's kind of that do everything wing player is Johnny Furphy from Kansas. He's originally from Australia. He decided to come to America, play here. Had a bit of an up and down season, but played really well in Big 12 season, especially when he got into the starting lineup. Averaged about, I think, 12 points per game in Big 12 play. A little bit more of an inconsistent shooter. Didn't measure particularly well, so he doesn't maybe check those boxes perfectly. But he's super athletic getting to the basket. Really, really smart cutter. There's Johnny Furphy's now kind of the favorite guy mocked to the Magic in general. The next player type I want to talk about is point guards, because while I think that the Magic should be looking for point guard elsewhere, there are a lot of really interesting guards where the Magic are picking and players who can kind of fill that guard need. I think the dream pick for the Magic would be Jared McCain from Duke. He's a 6'3" guard, not necessarily a pure passer, but he is an excellent three-point shooter. Shot like 42% from three last year at Duke. He's not super explosive or athletic, but he's really good at figuring out ways to finish around players and to get his shot off against bigger players. And so he has this experience. The question is, can he do that at the NBA level? It's one thing doing it in college. Can he do it at the NBA level? But he had a really good year at Duke. He had some really big scoring games, including in the NCAA tournament. Really, really good kid from everyone. I know a few people that work, there's a reporter here in Orlando who covered him in high school, and she said she just raved about him as a person, which I think is a big thing that Magic look for. He could be gone. I've seen some mocks have him go where Orlando is, but if he's off the board, there are a couple point guards to keep an eye on. Devin Carter's probably going to be gone, but he's someone to think about from Providence. The guy that a lot of people really like is Carlton Bub Carrington from Pittsburgh.
Okay.
He's a 6'3" guard, 6'8" wingspan, so that checks off that box. We all know, like Jeff Weltman. Jeff Weltman jokes about it too. They know about the joke as well. 6'3" with a 6'8" wingspan. His shooting percentages look really low because he was on the ball a lot, and so he is an excellent pull-up jump shooter, excellent mid-range jump shooter. A lot of people believe he's an excellent catch-and-shoot three-point shooter. So coming into a Magic system where he doesn't need to have the ball a lot in his hands, he's not looking to go crazy. He's not going to drive wildly to the basket. But he's a really interesting player too, and someone to keep an eye on. And then the last player type that I think you're really looking at this draft pick is rim protecting center. And that's, I think, a big need that the Magic do have. I don't think it's so immediate. The Magic seem pretty set with Wendell Carter and Mo Wagner as their centers. We don't know really what's going to happen with Goga Bitadze. I would still argue the Magic need a third center who is starting capable, and I'm not confident any of the centers in this draft are ready to start, but you do have some options. The biggest option that everyone will talk about is Zach Edey, 7'4", two-time Naismith Award winner at Purdue. Came back to college after his I think sophomore year. Matched it, obviously, had another really good year. Showed some development with his mobility, showed some development with his defense, especially, just a big body. You're going to be in drop coverage. I don't think he's necessarily a Magic type player just because he doesn't have the versatility. He doesn't have the foot speed to get out on the perimeter. You're going to have to play a lot of drop with him. But he turned himself into a surefire first round pick, maybe in the lottery pick. He's a really solid player. The guy I think Magic fans should really do their research on or know is Indiana big man Kahlil Whitney. Kahlil Whitney is, I think, 6'10" with a 7'2" wingspan. Excellent shot blocker. Blocked like 2-3 shots. Blocked like 2.5 shots per game in Indiana last year. Has shown, average like 12 rebounds per game, which in a 40-minute game is really difficult to do. 15 points per game. He has shown a willingness to step out onto the perimeter and shoot some threes. I wouldn't trust him to shoot threes immediately in the NBA. But if you're looking for a player who could be like this draft's Derek Lively, where he maybe didn't have the greatest college career, but he does all the things that NBA centers have to do, protecting the rim, kind of being athletic, playing above the rim. Kahlil Whitney to me is the guy that's like, okay, if there's a Derek Lively in this draft, it's him. He transferred from Oregon. There's a little bit of controversy. There's some draft scouts who are just completely out on him because he has that dreaded motor issue. I've heard from some Indiana fans and some people in Indiana who are like, I don't like that. That may have been his reputation at Oregon. That wasn't his reputation in Indiana. So a lot of the conversation about Kahlil Whitney is less about what his basketball skills are and more about whether he really wants to translate that to the NBA. And I think that's ultimately what a lot of teams are going to be looking at. And then the other name I want people to know is Yves Missy from Baylor. Kind of your typical, very raw rim protector, just kind of flies all over the place, blocking shots, fouls a lot. he would need a lot of work if you're drafting him. I would give him a G League gap year to just kind of continue to develop and grow and learn kind of the base of defense. So, we're picking at 18. There's a there's wide web. Names. There's a wide web here, but those are kind of the 6. And, there's plenty more like Deshaun George and, I'd throw Tyler Kolek in there. And there are plenty of, Baylor Shireman, I think is another really good shooter who's kind of going to be in the back end of this draft. We could talk about Terrence Shannon. I really don't want to. There are a lot of names. Obviously, your tree widens at this stage of the draft. The Magic do have a lot of options, and it's just about what need do they feel like they need to fill, what is the best pick for them, and how best to develop that player moving forward.
Yeah, Kahlil Ware's somebody you've talked a lot about, Gary, over the last few weeks.
A few weeks ago, I mentioned Kahlil Ware as somebody who could essentially be that lively pick, like you said, and then. Last week's pod, we had Wes Trueblood on, who's the Pacers Spaces host. He's a big fan of your show, Phil. And he was saying, as well as an Indiana resident, he said what a great pickup Kahlil Ware would be for the Magic. And it seems to be gathering a little bit of speed, but then there's people suggesting that he could fall into the late lottery as well, which would again put him another comparison to
this is going to be a wildly unpredictable draft. Like I want to prepare everyone because it's everyone's kind of acknowledged this is not a great draft class. Like at the top, especially like Alex Sarr, the best comparison I've seen for him is he's Jonathan Isaac with worse defense, worse, not otherworldly defense, but better offensive skills or better offensive base. But he is super, super raw. He's still been my number 1 pick. I haven't really wavered on that. But you could have someone like Nikola Topic, Nikola Topic, 6'6" point guard from played in Serbia, tore his ACL. He was a surefire top 10 pick, could have been a top 5 pick. I've seen mock drafts that have him going 18. And like, if Nikola Topic is there at 18, it's just like, how do you not take him? Because ultimately, like, this is my big thing about what the Magic are trying to build is like the Magic have this philosophy of everyone does everything. Like we have 2 6'10" point guards in Paolo and Franz. Jalen Suggs can handle the ball a little bit. Cole Anthony's an excellent rebounder for a guy who's 6'3". The idea of what the Magic are trying to build is everyone does everything. And so you want players who have skills that are not typical for their size. And so, I look at a guy like Topic and it's like, if he's there at 18, I will wait a year for him to recover from an ACL. Give him a year in the G League at that too. We have all the resources to get him better. Certainly we have the experience too. You can't pass up on talent like that. Like this is where you get talent.
It's a bit of an overlap really for the next question because we've got so many options where, you've just said yourself, Phil, that we could take a player, we could stash them with the Osceola Magic, we could put them on the main roster. And you've mentioned about being a weak draft, perhaps a weaker draft. Is there a scenario where the Magic, say, package our pick with a player such as Wendell Carter to move up into maybe the top 10? Is there anyone really who would be like, a pick, say, 6 to 10 that would be worth doing that for?
I kind of wish I had my cheat sheet with me. I'm doing the Locked On mock draft right now, and I was like, okay, I don't want what happened last year to happen, where I felt like I was like a little unprepared for when we did it last year and got yelled at for it. And I turned out to be very well prepared for it. I'm going to take a victory lap on that. But not with the number 6 pick. That was still a bad pick on my part. But there are a few players that I think would be interesting to trade up for. I've been a big Dalton Connect fan for a long time. He's 6'8", probably the best shooter in this draft. Again, a senior, someone that would be able to come in and presumably contribute pretty quickly. I mentioned Topic is a guy that I really, really like. But there's no one in this draft. I'm a big believer that if you have a guy in this draft, go get him. Like, if you have a guy in any draft, you're picking a player. You're not picking your pick. Go pick a player. Go find a player that you really like. And, if you believe, depending on how much you believe in them, go out and get them. I would say for this Magic team and what they need and what their more immediate needs are and what their more immediate goals are, I don't see a player that I'm just like, I need to have this guy to complete what I'm working on. There's the guys that, we're going to get to this, I'm sure, very, very soon. The guys that I'm thinking this is what the Magic need are veteran players, are players that I'm confident know how to play in the NBA, aren't going to make, kind of rookie or young player mistakes. We're expecting still some young player mistakes. It's still going to be a young team, but are guys that can help this team win a playoff series, can help them advance to the second round, help them get home court advantage. The Magic have kind of laid that gauntlet down themselves, that their goal, like they didn't win a road game in the playoffs. Like they know how important home court advantage could be in the postseason now. I think they're, the same way they're like, we're going to the playoffs next year. Their goal is to be a top 4 seed. And so if that's the player's goal, and the players have a lot to say about that, I'm curious, the question will be how much of that is a goal of the front office to make sure that happens. And, honestly, I don't think there's kind of that impact rookie that can do that. I don't see like a Donovan Mitchell that, is being a little bit overlooked, who is just a superstar player like he was in Utah. Because remember, Utah, I use this example all the time. Utah traded up to get Donovan Mitchell. That was a Denver pick. Denver actually picked Donovan Mitchell. Utah wanted him. Kawhi Leonard. San Antonio wanted Kawhi Leonard. They traded up to get him, and that's in the that was in the teens. I don't think there's a player that screams that to me. Like we're kind of looking at Donovan Klay going top 5. Like he's a fine center. In most drafts he wouldn't be a top 5 pick. And that's kind of the reality of the top of this draft. I think by the time we get to 18, we're looking at players that are your typical kind of 15 to 20, overall picks. But above that, it's just like, how much am I really willing to give up to go get Dalton Connect? Like the Magic could go find a guy who's very similar to Dalton Connect in the free agent market. Yeah. Cost you a little bit more, but you can find him.
Phil, you've talked a lot about how the draft's going to shape what the Magic are going to do the rest of the offseason. We've obviously got contract extensions, which the Magic can negotiate with Franz and Jalen Suggs, which, as you said, I think on today's episode that I was listening to, that you think there's more possibility that it's going to get pushed down the road and that they're going to say, prove that you're worth a max contract, Franz Wagner, and we'll see, and we'll check back in with you next offseason. We'll renegotiate. But in terms of free agency, I know Malik Monk appears to be probably the only player in this free agency class who most Magic fans seem to be on board with because of his age, his athleticism, his ability to spread the floor, get to the rim, and what it's probably going to cost to get him as well. But in terms of free agency, there isn't really a standout player who I think is the perfect fit. Is there, I don't know, is there a player who potentially, because obviously we've got 2 years to play with cap space, so you could push this into next year. Is there a player who you think maybe the Magic have circled, who they think maybe becomes available at the deadline or next summer, that what moves they make this summer, maybe a short-term move in terms of hoping that something becomes, it's a dangerous game to play, I know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the NBA. Like, players become available. Like it's not crazy. I mean, I think everyone kind of foresaw Pascal Siakam becoming available. Like Toronto was kind of spinning its wheels, and they didn't get a new contract done with him, so the alarm bells were ringing. But you don't know. Like even looking at this summer, like the Hawks could trade Trae Young and DeJounte Murray on draft night and completely restart their franchise around Alex Sarr or Zachary Rissacher or whoever they end up picking. Or they could say, you know what, we're going to keep Sarr. We're going to have Jalen Johnson and Alex Sarr, as two kind of big, versatile wings. Sarr can play some center. Who cares? Put them with Okongwu. We're a little bit bigger now. We have Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. We're back in this thing, baby. Like what Atlanta does at 1 actually like sets a whole bunch of the summer. Miami could decide we're done with Jimmy Butler. Like Jimmy Butler has been like agitating like he wants to leave. There's just so many things that we're probably not even thinking of. There's a lot of non-obvious things that could happen, and teams could decide at a certain point, like it's time to restart. We've hit the dead end. We're going to be proactive about this. I mean, who saw the Magic trading Nikola Vucevic when they did? I think we all expected the Evan Fournier trade. We expected the Aaron Gordon trade, but I think a lot of us said, the Magic don't want to go back into a full rebuild. Like Vucevic still matters, but it turns out trading him early was the right move. Was trading him when no one expected you to trade him. That's what that's what set this up. That's what set up where the team is at now. So, I think
is there anyone out there who you think, because obviously Jalen, Paolo, and Franz, that's the core. Is there anyone that you think is like the perfect next addition? You look at the Celtics of like Derek White or players like that.
Yes, the perfect guard is Derek White, and he's unfortunately not available. I hate to say that he's unavailable. The Celtics are going to re-sign him. He's the key. Like watching the Celtics play, that's how the Magic want to play. Like if you're trying to envision what this Orlando team is building, Boston's doing it right now. And so it's not like you have to copy everything you do. Like I've seen some people say, oh, like Paolo is Jason Tatum, Franz is, Jaylen Brown, Jalen Suggs is, Derek White or Drew Holiday, whichever one you want him to be. Jonathan Isaac is Kristaps Porzingis. I don't think you need to do that direct comparison, but there is something to it that, Boston is a team with 5 guys who are really good decision makers and very versatile defensively. So, there is a roadmap there. And, again, it's about how do you match up and what happens when you match up and all that stuff. Finding that player is really tough. And I think the hesitancy about this free agency market is, yes, the Magic need to spend. Yes, the Magic need to set themselves up for their future when they don't have money to spend and don't have cap room anymore. But there's no one out there that's just like, that guy's going to make us not only good, not only better this year, but help us get from point B to point C. We're at point A, playoffs, knocking on the door of the second round. How do we get to the second round? How do we get to the conference finals? How do we get to the championship? I don't know if that player is in this free agency market. Like I mentioned this on my pod earlier this week. Klay Thompson would undoubtedly make this team better. Like he would transform this team's offense, give them some spacing, even if he is, never reaches the heights of his shooting that he was 2-3 years ago. Or before the injury, especially. He's had two sub 43% shooting seasons in his career, and they've happened in the last 3 years, including last year. There is plenty of evidence to say Klay Thompson is starting to slow down, and that Father Time is winning that battle. But even shooting 38% from 3 and taking 10 threes a game, like I said, it's about volume as much as it is percentages. Yeah, that would transform the Magic's offense. Like I think he had 30 plus games of 10 or more 3-pointers last year. The Magic had 11 total where an individual player shot more than 10 threes or 10 or more threes. Like that's the kind of transformation that we'd be talking about. But I would say this, you're probably not signing Klay Thompson to more than a 2 or 3 year deal. So when that 2-year deal runs out or that 3-year deal runs out, what are you going to do? You don't have that same amount of money anymore because now Paolo's getting paid, $40+ million. Franz is at $35, $36, $37 million. Jalen, the cap is rising, but it's not rising enough to replace
front load the contract like they've done with other deals they've done.
Jalen, Franz, and Paolo are not doing the Weltman special. They're not front loading that contract. I would say this.
No, in terms of Klay Thompson, for example.
And Klay Thompson. Yeah. I mean, I would hope that the Magic will try to front load those contracts because that just helps on the back end a little bit. But, I think something we could see the Magic do. There are a few players I think would be targets for this. We could see them do like the Bruce Brown special. And the Magic kind of did this with Joe Ingles too, where you sign a player to an above market rate for like 2 years, 3 years with an easy out, a team option, non-guarantee on that last deal. And now you just have salary ballast to make that big move. The Pacers did this with Bruce Brown. Remember last summer, we all thought the Magic were going to chase after Bruce Brown, excellent shooter, good playmaker, championship experience, big time player for the Nuggets. He ended up getting a 2-year, $50 million deal from the Pacers, $25 million per. And it was just like, that's too rich for us. We're not looking for that. Pacers went around and flipped him for Pascal Siakam. And now, they made the conference finals, obviously. And now they seem very set. Now they got their max guy. They signed him. It's, they reportedly agreed to terms with him. And now they're all set. It feels like a lot of, the Rockets did that with Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks to some extent. The Magic did it to some extent with Joe Ingles. And maybe the Magic keep Joe Ingles just to use him as salary ballast for trades. But it feels like that might be a strategy that a lot of teams do. And so if there are no home run hits in this free agency, if the Magic don't think Tyus Jones is the answer, D'Angelo Russell is the answer, even Malik Monk, like there's a lot to like about Malik Monk. Don't get me wrong. I think among the free agent targets, he's the guy I would look at, give him a deal starting around 21, 22, maybe $23 million, about as high as I would go, 3-4 years, whatever it is. He's an excellent, he's a much better playmaker than people give him credit for. I have concerns about whether he can step up to being a starter, whether he can insert himself into the Magic's kind of defensive scheme, whether the Magic can cover for him defensively, whether he can be that table setter. Again, like that Sacramento offense, it inflates your numbers a little bit. It's, very fast paced. They're very good offense too. Don't get me wrong. And Monk is a big part of that, but can he play at Paolo's pace? Jamal, I remember Jamal Mosley said this one time about Luka Doncic. We were asking him about pace and the speed that the Magic were playing. And I think it was Jamal Mosley who said this, for Dallas, Luka is their pace. Your star controls the pace of your team. How your star likes to play, that's how fast you play. Paolo said it after playoffs. He loved how slow the playoffs were. He loved the kind of chess match and how it just became this kind of grinded out game. For those that want to see the Magic run, get more possessions, that's not Paolo. That's not a Paolo basketball team. I don't think that's who this Magic team is ever going to be. And that's okay. You can win slowing it down a little bit. You gotta be able to shoot, you gotta be able to score a little bit more than the Magic do. But Magic were an elite defensive team and had a positive net rating, finished 5th in the East. It won 47 games. And so it wouldn't surprise me if the Magic ultimately decide to go with this kind of big short-term deal. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope supposedly looking for $20 million. Denver's going to be hard-pressed to match that. Go give Kentavious Caldwell-Pope a 2-year, $45 million deal. Put a non-guarantee on that last deal, on that last year. You have a championship caliber 3-and-D wing, a good decision maker, a really good shooter. You have him for this year, and then you have some salary ballast if you want to make a trade next year when you're like, okay, how do we take that next step? So maybe that's the path the Magic go. It won't be exciting. I think people would be a little disappointed with it, but there's, you're playing chess, not checkers here. And I think that's, ultimately the goal is how do we make this team better? KCP wouldn't maybe win you some headlines, but he'd make this team better. And I think that's kind of the goal right now in the short term is let's just make the team better. Let's get some shooting in. Let's kind of see what things look like. And then, let's assemble our stack. Let's get our chips in house in order to make the big move when the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, it's really going to be interesting coming into this, and I think one of the big questions to look at, Phil, from what you were saying there, is that you're talking about the conundrum of big splash or adding key pieces, and we've got the 2-year window, but also we've got the question of staying, almost G's not here, but keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. What do you think the Magic have to accomplish in this off season to just stay, to have a chance at a top 4 shot in the Eastern Conference next year?
I mean, the first thing is Paolo and Franz have to keep getting better. We could talk about all these moves and all these things, but it goes back to that kind of central thesis that I mentioned earlier. How do we make Paolo's life easier? How do we get him easier shots? How do we just allow him to operate comfortably? He does a really good job operating uncomfortably, but you see all these charts and you see some stats, and he's double teamed constantly because at the end of the day, no one is scared of the Magic shooting. And so I do think for the offseason to be successful, the Magic have to add a starting level player. Gary Harris just doesn't cut it anymore. He's fine. I wouldn't mind him coming back on a smaller deal. He doesn't cut it as a starter anymore. He's not a starter in the NBA anymore. So find me a starting guard who can shoot. I prefer a starting point guard. I prefer someone who can kind of set the table a little bit, play off the ball, be a shooter. I said, this is a guy that the Magic may target this offseason, like a Malcolm Brogdon. Go get me a Malcolm Brogdon. Go get me Malcolm Brogdon if you really want to. And tell me and give me that player that just kind of levels everybody, keeps everyone on task, distributes the ball, plays off of Paolo. Get me someone like that to just, again, make Paolo's life easier. Get him some open shots. Get him some easier shots. Get him the ball in his spot so he can operate more comfortably instead of having to instead of the Magic having to manipulate things to get him the ball in those spots. To me, that's the big thing. The next thing is, as much as the Magic were deep and they had the 4th highest scoring bench in the league, so it's not like this is a thing that's broken. I'd like some more consistent depth. I'd like some more consistent veteran depth. Just guys that I can rely on. I constantly felt like this season for the Magic that when everybody was healthy and all the pieces were kind of perfectly aligned, this was a really good team. This was better than a 47-win team. Where they ran into problems, I felt like was if you knocked off one piece, guys struggled to fill the roles. Like if to me, like if there's a reason that D'Angelo Russell is really attractive to me, or like Malik Monk is this way too. D'Angelo Russell can be really successful playing off the ball as a 3-point shooter, as a 3-point specialist, and that's all he does. He's also pretty good. Don't want this all time, don't want to rely on this, but he'll also have games where he scores 35 points and attacks the basket and plays like an all-star, because he was an all-star at one point. Mm-hmm. The Magic right now don't have that player. Like, sometimes Jalen Suggs has a really nice shooting night, scores 25 points. But like I mentioned earlier, Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner are the only guys attacking the paint. Like, Mo Wagner had a 28-point game. He's getting a lot of that off of kind of simple pin downs, simple post ups, simple putbacks, kind of really simple stuff. The Magic need another guy, especially coming off the bench, who can just add a little bit more dynamic play to their offense. As good as the bench was all year, I think it really hurt them in the playoffs. I think the bench was a weak spot in the playoffs for them because, the Magic never really tightened their rotation, which they probably should have done. They didn't really have any, Cole Anthony wasn't really able to attack. I think that's ultimately what they want Cole Anthony to be, is to be that, random 25-point night guy. I don't think that's his game. And so find me a guy you can bring off the bench. Buddy Hield would, we know he can get hot and he can hit a bunch of threes and, completely change your offense. Like what Terrence Ross did in 2019, where he just gets hot, gets 5 or 6 threes, and all of a sudden the game is completely changed.
That's what Malik Monk feels like.
Yeah,
that signing is almost like a Terrence replacement.
Exactly. And so to me, like when you look at this Magic team, they were relying very heavily on Caleb Houston. They were relying pretty heavily on, Gary Harris. Just a lot of guys that you just couldn't consistently expect to step up to bigger roles. Like they're really good in the roles you give them. But they, what I'm essentially saying is like the Magic have Paolo and Franz, they're ones, Jalen's a 2, Jalen's a number 2 kind of number 2, number 3 option. You don't have guys that can step up from, tonight's my night. I gotta be the guy. They don't have that. They don't have that player. Maybe Anthony Black turns into that. It's not going to happen overnight. But they need a guy who can, I feel like, really anchor that bench group and just be consistent for them. Like Caleb Houston had that big game against Atlanta and just kind of rode that for the rest of the season. Never got to that level or anywhere close to it again. Just took a lot of threes and missed them.
Yeah, 100%. I'm looking forward to Magic Twitter, Phil, after we've done with free agency and the draft, and the Magic just come back with the same roster.
People are going to hate me for that KCP take. I can already hear them shouting. It's just I hate to tell you guys.
KCP is somebody else we've talked about. I think Paul brought him up about 3 or 4 weeks ago as a really good option as well. There's options though, and
there's a lot of directions
to build from. Yeah, absolutely.
I like the warning I would give everyone is this is not a front office that cares about winning headlines. If we exit the summer and the Magic don't have that like big name player that we all expected, don't be shocked by it. Don't criticize them. Let's see how it plays out, but don't be shocked by it.
But before we let you go, Klay Thompson, he was in the news a little bit again yesterday. The Magic are now joint favourites. It actually feels like there's a lot of smoke around this. I know you've talked about Klay and how you think he's going to fit. Do you think he's really that option? Do you really think he's going to be a Magic player next year?
I have always been skeptical ever since the reports came out. They always seem to be coming from people who don't have a lot of connection to Orlando. And again, Orlando's front office always very, very quiet. And it just, to me, it feels like a very short-sighted move, or an uncharacteristically short-sighted move for this front office. It feels like a very win-now move with no consideration for beyond. And this is where I kind of came down on it in my pod, was that, you get Klay Thompson, like the team's going to be better. Like I've mentioned already the ways that it would make the team better. But the Magic's window is like the next 5 to 7 years. So you have, with Klay Thompson, you got a 2 to 3 year window, and then it's pretty much closed. Again, when you have an opportunity to win, you got to take it. The winning window is open. The Magic need to be aggressive with ways to help them win. Klay Thompson would help this team win. It's not the move I would do. I think the cost is going to be too high. I think I think you're paying more for past performance than future performance, which I think is, a little bit of a mistake. I think that the Magic as a team they're not a very high cutting team. And so the kind of shots that Klay Thompson got from Golden State, those aren't the kind of shots Orlando really creates. It's not, maybe the offense needs to be revitalized and changed a little bit. But the kind of shot profile that Klay Thompson took in Golden State, that's not how the Magic run their offense. So they'd have to change their offense a little bit for him, which is a good thing. But yeah, it feels like there's a lot of smoke, a lot more smoke than normal. And while the Magic, tend to work very quietly, we have to consider it. And, I'm a big believer in the Horace Grant theory that the reason why the 95 Magic became champions is they went out and got a champion. They got someone who knew what they were doing, who imparted championship wisdom and maturity to a very young and experienced team. I'm not going to be upset if the Magic sign Klay Thompson. There are plenty of reasons to sign him. He would, even if he is just a 38% three-point shooter for the rest of his career, that would transform the Orlando Magic. Klay Thompson shooting 38% from three is very different from Jalen Suggs shooting 39% from three. Like it would, Klay Thompson steps on the floor and changes the Magic's offense. And so I don't have many basketball reasons to argue against it. I hinted at a few, but if he's truly interested in coming to Orlando, you have to absolutely explore it. You have to consider it. You have to talk about it. And he would be a good fit here. I think his defense has definitely slowed down a little bit, but he's shown himself very willing to defend. He is not a hesitant defender. A lot of the guys we're talking about in free agency are like Malik Monk has never proven himself as a defender. Tyus Jones is not a good defender. D'Angelo Russell is not a good defender. If the Magic's philosophy is about defense first, Klay Thompson may not be the defender he once was, but he understands a defensive team concept and will commit to it. And I think that is a big difference too. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Phil, it's going to be a lot of fun in the next few weeks. You're going to have your work cut out for sure. But I'm
just going to sit back and watch. The Magic aren't telling us anything. Like I'll just wait. I'll just wait and find it.
And in the meantime, you can cheer on England from the other side of the pond for us, who let us down this evening. But
still got the point.
That's all that matters. All that matters.
You're not out of the tournament. You just group phase. Just get out of the group phase.
It's not how you start; it's how you finish.
Exactly. So, you want the wins at the end. You'll take the draws at the beginning.
100%.
Well, I know that me, Mikey, Paul, and G are all cheering England on.
I'm not sure about the Welsh one, but
I'm going in there for when he watches this, just for
come be disappointed in the U.S. at Copa America with all of us. Like we're getting ready for just bitter disappointment. And I mean, like I was at the U.S. Brazil game last week in Orlando. Like Greg Berhalter was getting booed, and then the U.S. went out and got their second ever result against Brazil. So who knows?
Good stuff. Well, Phil, thank you for joining us, my friend. It's always great catching up with you. And we'll look forward to catching up with you soon.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me on, as always.
Well, thank you to Phil for jumping on. As always, it's a good time catching up with Phil. And our heads are all full of different ideas and different paths the Magic are going to take. And I'm not sure Phil's helped us with that, whether he has or hasn't.
He's posed some new questions.
He's posed some questions. At the end of the day, Phil said it to us off air. None of us really know what the Magic are going to do. So let's sit back, enjoy the summer. Let's see what happens. But yeah. Before we go, just want to tell you quickly about today's partner. Are you looking for tickets and hotels for the world's best theme parks and attractions? Then check out Attraction Tickets. They are the UK's #1 ticket provider for Walt Disney World, Universal Studios, SeaWorld, Disneyland Paris, and other popular attractions. They also sell Orlando Magic tickets when they go on sale at hugely competitive prices. So when you're booking your next holiday, use our link in the description and see what they have to offer. You can also visit our website, letstalkmagic.com, for all our affiliate links and discount codes, including the NBA store and Fanatics. But Gary, that's going to do it for us this week. Anything else you want to bring up before we go?
No, just let's see what the latest news that comes out, the latest links, and see who we're linked to tonight, tomorrow, and over the weekend, because it's just going to be more and more talking points on Twitter.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're recording our next episode on Friday next week, so that episode will probably drop over the weekend, so keep an eye out for that one as well. Thank you for listening and watching. If you enjoyed today's episode, give a thumbs up and leave us your thoughts and questions, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube if you're watching on there. You can also like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, TikTok and X, all at _Let's Talk Magic. So from Gary and myself and an absent Geraint and Paul, go Magic.